Welcome to the Dynamite conference call recorded on July 27, 2017 and hosted by Dynamite CEO Callie Zamzow with special guests Judy and Regan Golob. Grab a pen and paper and remove any distractions as we learn about electrolytes and how Dyna Spark can support your animal's electrolyte needs. And remember, Dynamite products are not intended to treat, prevent, cure, or mitigate any diseases. Enjoy the call.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Dyna Spark conference call. First, I'm going to assume that we all know a little bit about electrolytes. So I think we probably ought to start with the basic science to clear up any misconceptions that are created by media and by big beverage companies who have taught us everything we shouldn't know about electrolytes. Most of the time when we talk about electrolytes or when we hear about electrolytes, they're discussed surrounding their use in exercise and hot weather. But the fact is that electrolytes are actually needed year-round, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the simple description of an electrolyte is that they are conductors. So they're minerals within our bodies that conduct electricity. So they help move or conduct electrical energy all throughout our body. So for instance, when our brain hears our phone alert from our Farmville app and it sends an electrical chemical communication through the body, the pulses go through the nerve cells and across fluids and communicate to your arm and your hand to reach out and grab your phone and harvest the apple trees in your virtual farm, or whatever it is that you're doing. Reading a newspaper, washing your hair, having a conversation, trying to recall a memory to share with your friends, things like that. Electrolytes are involved with all of those functions. We're literally using them all the time. And as such, we actually have to have a daily reservoir of electrolytes circling in our system all the time so that we don't disrupt the communication that happens. Some indicators that we are low on electrolytes for our daily electrolytes, or at least an imbalance in electrolytes, are things like muscle cramps and eye twitches and coordination issues and forgetfulness, things like that. So for those basic daily electrolyte needs, Dynamite has created the Daily Foundation programs. And those supplements contain, among lots of other things, the daily amounts of electrolytes that are needed to maintain your structure and function of the communication within your body. So it's important to note the basic on electrolytes, but this call is about addressing the more acute electrolyte needs that occur when an animal or a human exceeds the normal daily function. So particularly in excessive heat or during exercise or physical stress, things like that require more electrolytes than our basic foundation requirements. So a little bit of history before I turn it over to the experts. I recalled years ago that my dad began working on an electrolyte formula. I'm guessing it was probably Judy and Regan and others who came to him and said, we need an electrolyte. It's the buzz in the industry. We know that it's necessary. And so he understood that it was the next big thing, and he could see that the bandwagon of companies that were trying to make money marketing electrolytes were not addressing it properly. Because what he could see is that all that they were doing was replacing the minerals that were lost in sweat. And understanding physiology, this really doesn't make sense. We don't test our urine to determine what it is we need to eat or drink. We know that our bodies are converting our food through many, many biochemical reactions within the body. And so what is coming out is not what we should put right back in again. There are other things that need to be put back into the body to feed those biochemical reactions. So it literally took my dad years to develop the product that we call Dyna Spark for horses. And it fully addresses electrolyte needs at much, much deeper levels than just the loss of sweat. So with that, I'm going to give it over to Gold Directors and Dynamite experts, Judy and Regan Golob.
Good morning.
All righty. Hey, you're there, Doc.
Yay!
So I remember when Dyna Spark was just being conceived, Jim was at the AERC convention with me and Bev Gray and a bunch of the others, and we were listening to a presentation by some vets on electrolytes, and I remember Jim leaning over and whispering in my ear, "They've got it backwards." And it's like, wow. What they were doing was taking, as Callie said, sweat scrapings from a horse and putting that back into the electrolyte formula. Well, what happens under the influence of heat, exercise, hormones, enzymes, the sodium that the horse was taking in was transmuting into potassium and coming out in the sweat. So they're saying, oh, we need to supplement with potassium. And I know there are even some people that use light salt as an electrolyte, which is, wow, again, totally backwards. So, like usually, Dynamite digs into, as Callie said, the deeper levels of these things. And what the conventional experts fail to realize is there's a process called biological transmutation that was actually discovered by a pair of French doctors that almost won a Nobel Prize for the discovery, because what they discovered was the ability of the body to transmute one ion into another. And so that's the basis of the Dynamite Dyna Spark electrolyte. What we were using before we had it, was NTM salt and ismine in a mixture with applesauce, and using that at the vet checks. And Bev Gray and some of our other famous endurance riders used that for ages before we had the Dyna Spark, which of course was the next step up. So definitely improved performance, better hydration, and just overall better use of the electrolytes with our formula. The thing I love about it too is it has blackstrap molasses as the quote sugar source. A lot of electrolytes just dump a bunch of sugar in just for quick glucose energy, and that can work in reverse as well. So we actually use the blackstrap molasses, which, Callie, you might want to comment a little bit on the blackstrap, or Regan. What are the advantages of that?
Well, it's one of the most alkalizing sources in all the food world, and so it helps to alkalize. And as you're using your muscles and working your body hard, you're producing a lot of lactic acid, and so that can come to a whole thing of tying up if the liver is not able to process that lactic acid back through, because it doesn't have alkalizing in there. And so sugar, most of the sugar they're using is just a sucrose base that creates a little bit more of an acidic environment depending on their source of the sugar, usually which comes from a grain source. So that would definitely create a little bit more of acidity factor in that. And the only reason they have to do all that sugar and stuff into those electrolytes is because the horses never would touch the electrolytes that they do. And one thing you got to really realize with electrolytes also is, horse minerally balanced before the event is the key thing. I mean, you see these wild horses out there that it'll take 3 sets of horses to run these down. I mean, these horses don't get any electrolytes, but they're balanced for their environment that they're running in and eating in, and it's very alkaline soil where they're at. I mean, most of the time the pH is 9 out there. And I was involved in some endurance races back in Dubai where it's really hot and the horses are really stressed. And the veterinarians were trying to give electrolytes preventatively. And what that does is sucks water out of the system into the gut. You know, at this one particular point, the vet actually pulled water because the horse had quit eating. And I said, I don't think you ever pull water. I think that's the most primary nutrient there is water above food. So I see that happening a lot. So that's kind of my take on it. So blackstrap molasses, and ours is organic that we put in there. And, I mean, they love it. They go for it. They'll lick it off your hands. I don't care what species. Maybe cats won't, but dogs, horses, and cows, pigs, and all of those things will lick it off your hand. And a great trick for cats is if you want to get something in them, just wet their paw and put it on there, and then they'll lick it off to clean themselves up. So that one always works good, too.
That's really sneaky. Well, the other thing with blackstrap, it's actually the byproduct of the sugar refining process, and it is sugar cane, not sugar beet, because we know that all the beets are now GMO. So it's made from the third boiling of the sugar syrup. So it's real concentrated after the sucrose. has been crystallized and taken out. So it's also really high in B vitamins, especially B6, which raises serotonin. So that's an important hormone that controls mood and prevents pain, depression, fatigue. So that's going to be of huge benefit, obviously, to an endurance horse especially. It's also high in chromium, so it helps stabilize the blood sugar levels. So that's just a huge upgrade to an electrolyte formula to use the blackstrap molasses. And the other little trick that we've found is if you ever have a horse that's picky about something that you would really choose to have the horse eat and it's not cooperating, just the tiniest little dribble of Dyna Spark on the feed, maybe add it to some water and put it on there, and they will eat like literally anything that has Dyna Spark on it. So that's a great thing. So some of the things that you'd look for to know if your horse is getting dehydrated, of course, the major symptoms include muscle cramps, rapid heart rate, excessive sweating, or no sweating. And those might not appear till the next day, but you can do the pinch test on the horse's neck or shoulder. And the longer the skin stays kind of tented up, the more dehydrated the horse is. If the gums and nostrils are dark or reddish in the mucous membranes, that indicates dehydration. Slow capillary refill when you press on the gums. Temperature more than 102 that doesn't come down after exercise. So those are some of the things that people don't always look for. The first sign of dehydration is that the horse just isn't going to be as present, and this is true of people as well. They found in studies that driving, for people driving dehydrated is the equivalent of driving drunk because your mental processes slow down so much. So other things, endurance, of course, for sure, you would want to use an electrolyte formula, but people forget about the pleasure horses. You take a horse on a steep trail for 3 or 4 hours and they sweat a considerable amount in the summertime. They're going to lose electrolytes. Transport stress, where they're sweaty because they're nervous. Cushing's horses in particular, especially if they're not body clipped in the summer and they're really furry, they can overheat and they have abnormal sweating patterns. Also, the horses that have what's called anhydrosis, which is a complete inability to sweat, that's indicative of an electrolyte imbalance. And I know there are people also that don't sweat. My mom was a non-sweater. My sister's a non-sweater. I put her on Ismine and some elixir, and she actually got to the point where she could go to the gym and work out and sweat a little bit. So the electrolytes are super important in many other areas. Also, horses that refuse to drink enough water in the wintertime, they can dehydrate themselves. That can lead to impaction, colics, and ugly stuff. So I personally love feeding my horses a wet mash anytime using the Stanley Timothy pellets. Soak them to kind of like cow pie consistency, and in the wintertime especially using warm water. And just half an ounce of Dyna Spark in there will really encourage them to hydrate and drink properly in the wintertime. So I know Regan's probably got some tricks up his sleeve about that as well.
Yeah. Well, we have been, we have a cow-calf operation out here, and so we have a lot of maiden cows come through, and they can definitely get stressed out during the calving process, and some of them will get down and they don't have the energy to push anymore, and my wife doesn't go in there to pull them, so we just give them a little bit of Dyna Spark, and that baby usually will pop out within 3 to 4 minutes after we give them the Dyna Spark, and they're just looking for it. I mean, I want more of this, and we'll give them some Dynapro and stuff, but they're not as excited about the Dynapro as they are the Dyna Spark, and so I think they just need those added minerals in there to get that firing, and Judy had mentioned that with elderly and old. I have a 37-year-old thoroughbred, and she does way better in the winter than she does in the summer. I mean, the heat really can get to her, and so we've just started adding a little bit of Dyna Spark, and I just put it on my hand, and she just loves me on it, and loves it. So I see her being able to canter out into the pasture when the other horses will take off in a run and she takes off in a trot. I said, okay, I need to give her a little bit more Dyna Spark. And so as soon as I get that Dyna Spark into it, she will start to run with the other horses. So that's always cool. Just 100-degree days that she's still out there running, So that's an awesome thing there too. Even dogs, when we whelped a batch of puppies, and it was getting to be a long labor, for the last ones to come out. And we just gave the bitch a little bit of Dyna Spark, and poof, within 3 or 4 minutes, that last one just popped right out. So it obviously gets the electrolytes going and gets the nerve synapses starting to work again and getting them to think. I always remember that story about Jim and his mother-in-law, and she was not really paying attention, and he just said she's dehydrated, and he just went over and got some NTM salt and a little moisture and gave it to her. And at first she turned her head away, and then she started sucking on that and getting that electrolyte in, from just the salt. And she was like, "And what color dress are you going to buy, sweetie?" I mean, she just started talking. I was like, wow, that's so impressive, that what a small little change like that can do and make a difference.
So we had at the seminar in Iowa eons ago, somebody brought in a really debilitated mare as one of the demo horses, and it was a chestnut mare, and she came dragging into the arena just with her head down. She was thin. She just was really not in there. And part of what we did with her is shoot some Dyna Spark in her mouth, and Regan was talking to some people, and I was talking to some people, and Donna Pettit, who had brought the mare, all of a sudden she starts shouting, "Regan, Regan," that's what she called him, "come and look at this." And this mare, she had started to, color change from her head back. Dapples were popping out, and, I mean, literally, this was not a mass hallucination. There was probably 50 of us there, and we all saw it. You could just see the waves of energy moving back in this mare's body. And by the time she got done participating in the demo, she literally dragged the handler out of the arena at a trot. She put her out in one of the paddocks and back, and she was bucking and playing. I mean, that's how quickly the electrolytes were replenished with this formula. So that was pretty cool to watch. I can't help but think how much rescues would benefit from using a little Dyna Spark to help reestablish the electrolyte minerals in the system, because so many rescue horses that are really thin, they go south when they start getting minerals because they haven't had them for a while. They've used up heart muscle and all that. So getting some electrolytes in. The other thing that's super important is make sure they always have clean water, fresh water that does not have the electrolytes in it. Some people put it in a bucket of water. You always want to give them a choice of electrolyted water or plain water and let them figure it out, because their instinct is pretty strong. And if you don't give them water, that can be kind of a disaster. I remember Joss talking about one time he put some Dyna Spark in his mouth and he was hauling fertilizer back to the plant or something. And he said, all of a sudden my mouth got so dry and everything got dry. And I just pulled up to a house and ran up to their hose bib and turned on their garden hose and drank and drank and drank. So you can dehydrate them using too much electrolyte, too much Dyna Spark. So you have to find that balance. And I think the label directions are pretty explicit. Clearly you're using a lot more for an endurance horse than you would for a pleasure horse that maybe only sweats a little bit. So there's kind of an art form to using electrolytes as well.
Yeah. Yes, there is,
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, what she said.
What she said, exactly. Yeah, like I said, I don't think you want to use Dyna Spark as a preventative for a thing. And keeping all the mineral levels up to balance, you're going to use less and less Dyna Spark as that happens, unless you're in a high performance, high heat situation, or you've got an elderly geriatric animal that you're taking care of. with those. I mean, and like the border collies, we have a border collie. When she goes out and works cattle, I mean, she'll just work herself to death. And they've got little swimming pools for them or water troughs for them to jump in and just lay down. And she's actually when she's not working cattle, she's working swallows. So they really let her run. So she really loves to jump in the pool, and we'll give her a little bit of Dyna Spark too, and she'll love that. But it definitely, when they start getting so fatigued, their brain actually kind of stops functioning at that point. And that's what's happening with a lot of elderly people when they can't remember shit. It's their electrolytes are all off. It's so important to have those micro trace elements present in that sodium and potassium. Like in a blood test, a lot of times the potassium will be high in the blood test, and what that tells me is that they're sodium deficient, because the sodium is supposed to be extracellular and the potassium intracellular, and so the sodium-potassium pump has started to malfunction, and because they're so deficient, the body is throwing the potassium out of the intracellular into the bloodstream, and so it shows up high in the bloodstream. So many times it's high in the bloodstream, but they're actually low in potassium inside the cell, and they're even lower in sodium. And that's probably one reason why Jim said they've got this thing completely backwards when they started doing the electrolytes, So
yeah, for sure.
It's all fascinating. It's amazing how your body works.
Yeah, exactly. One question that came up, I guess, in an email before the call was about gastric upset, stomach upset with electrolytes. I think we see that primarily with the paste forms of electrolytes, that some of the companies sell electrolytes in a tube and people just paste it in. It's best taken in water so that it's properly diluted. And the other thing that most people do, especially on endurance rides or with running or event horses, I truly believe that every horse that's a performance horse needs to be on the Dynamite clay, the ulcer protocol. And so most of the endurance riders do shoot a 60 cc syringe of clay, activated clay, into the horse a couple times during the ride. That just kind of helps coat the stomach a little bit and soothe it. And the other thing is, when you're giving the Dyna Spark at a rest stop on an endurance ride, they're generally eating some hay and maybe even a little grain as well, so that kind of buffers. But I think the biggest thing you need to worry about with gastric upset is the paste and some of those other electrolyte formulas, which we don't have. So I truly believe it's not a concern with the Dyna Spark. We've never had really complaints about that. So
Judy,
what else?
Really quick, another little question that went along with that, I think. Just in general, a question that came in, are there situations where Dyna Spark is recommended daily? And I heard Regan say not necessarily, but are there situations where you might decide to feed it daily? And if so, will you put it in the food, you put it in the water? How would you administer it if you were going to do it in that way?
Well, if you're having just like the 120-degree heat wave in Phoenix and areas like that where things are like super, super hot, or you have a super cold winter where the horses are kind of reluctant to drink, those would be the times when I would use just a smidge, like half an ounce. You can put it in the feed, but again, make sure the horse has tons of clean water, fresh water all the time, or you can do the 2-bucket thing where you have a bucket that has the electrolytes in it and a bucket of plain water, and they'll very often switch back and forth. That would be super important to feed it a little bit daily on a long haul. Say you're hauling a horse across country, or you're shipping a horse, and that's a tough thing to do, to get the shippers to feed electrolytes or DynaPro or whatever, but it's pretty critical in my mind, especially if it's hot and they're sweating. So there are times when you would use it daily, not for a long, long time. And again, as Callie mentioned, the importance of having them on the basic Dynamite foundation, and that Regan mentioned too, which would be Dynamite or TNT, ideally Dynamite Plus, and having access to the 4 free choices. And TM Salt is mine 1-to-1, 2-to-1. That's the basic program for every horse. And if they put the endurance horses and the race horses on that, as Regan mentioned, they would have to use way less Dyna Spark. So that's about, filling up the bucket.
One time that I just kind of brought to mind is horses that, just go for salt, and they're eating so much salt, and soaking their soles and stuff. They're looking for something that might be in the salt at a trace element that's not there, and that might be an indication to either use the Ismine or maybe try some Dyna Spark and see if that will back them off of the salt, because they can eat the salt until they get it, but they might have to eat, 20,000 pounds of it to get the trace element that they're looking for. So, just trying to observe and be aware of the obvious with that stuff. And the Dyna Spark or the Ismine could be an amazing asset with that. The Dyna Spark, they're going to go for it. The Ismine, they're not going to go for it. But it is always interesting to watch which horses will go for the Ismine and which one won't. So, okay. My old horse right now, when it's hot, she gets Dyna Spark every day. And I can, I'll back off on the amount, and her slow walk, her, dragging her feet, those are all signs to me that she needs a little bit more electrolytes. And as soon as I boost it up, then she's back cantering out to the pastures and stuff.
Yep. It's pretty good confirmation. One thing that came up this morning, too, Pam sent out a blog post that's excellent on electrolytes to everybody this morning and mentioned Jim's cranberry juice formula that he put together for his mother-in-law. And the important thing with that is to realize you don't drink that whole quart of cranberry juice with elixir and NTM in it. You drink like a glass of that a day. So make sure that people understand that. You can overdo the electrolyte thing, too, and really throw things off. So one thing I've done for ages, and we used to do at the seminars all the time when it was hot, is put elixir in lemonade. And that it tastes awesome, and you find that you're just craving it. So you can add a little sprinkle of the NTM salt, too. And that's way better for you than Gatorade or some of the commercial electrolyte formulas. So.
Excellent. Well, we're getting close to our 30-minute mark. Is there anything else that you want to make sure to get on this call, Judy, before we tie things up?
Can't really think of anything other than for people to dig a little bit deeper into mineral nutrition. One thing that's in the Ismine is a lot of Ormus elements, and those are they're orbitally rearranged monatomic elements, and that means that they're basically elements that can transmute to another dimension under the influence of heat and hormones. They're really important for superconsciousness, and we do incorporate a lot of the Ormus elements into the Dynamite products, which kind of energetically takes the products to a whole different level. So once you guys understand that and understand how superior these formulations are compared to what else is out there on the market, it's absolutely amazing. So
good point.
They call them Ormus, O-R-M-U-S elements, or O-R-M-E, and they actually were rediscovered by David Hudson, an Arizona farmer, a number of years ago. He was drying some soil to be sent for a soil test, and it got really hot in the sun, and it just went poof in a flash of light and disappeared. So he had Cornell, I think, University do a bunch of studies on it, and they found some elements in there that aren't even on the periodic charts, like, and rhodium, iridium, some of those really vague elements that we don't hear too much about. So when you factor in the energetic aspect of those things into something like Dyna Spark, that just takes it to a whole new level.
Right. Those are also in the trace mineral concentrate.
Yep.
And I think that's why it can work so amazingly fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, both of you, for being on the call today. This has been, I learned a few things on this call today. It's very good. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of the call and for sharing what you know in your brains. I think we could probably go on for another hour with the other stuff that you know about the Dyna Spark, but I think this is fantastic to get us started. And we, like I said, it will be recorded and we will put it on the back office and probably send it out in a group email as well so that you can share with other people and answer their questions. And then again, just one last reminder. Yeah, you're welcome. One last reminder, if you have any questions that pop up anytime here in the next week or so, you could drop an email to Callie@dynamitemarketing.com and we will respond. And Callie is spelled Callie. So send your questions if they come up and we will happily answer them.
Awesome.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.